Hey, what's going on, everyone? Meteorologist Jonathan Kagas with you. It's been a couple of weeks, been out of town and away from the streaming software for a couple of weeks, but back with you now, and we have another tropical system to talk about. So, we're going to get all in on Julia, that is strengthening quickly as it approaches Central America, and it's moving rather fast. We're going to get all into Julia, and it's a good thing it is moving fast because it doesn't have as much time to strengthen. Of course, the water really warm in the Western Caribbean, so that's always a bad thing when you get a storm in the Western Caribbean. So we will talk about that. We're also going to touch on Florida flooding that continues, the St. Johns River in particular. So if you're watching from Florida, I know we have a lot of subscribers and viewers on this channel in parts of Florida and especially the Caribbean. So we're going to break down again Julia for our friends in the Caribbean and Central America, and then talk about still the record flooding that continues and will get a little bit worse over the next couple of days along the St. Johns in Florida. And then for those that love fall in the lower 48, really the first big blast, the first big nice full course meal, if you will, of fall is settling into the eastern third of the country. We already had it this morning in the upper Midwest. Frost warnings, freeze warnings in play. Those are now extending into the eastern third of the country. So for those that like fall in the United States, at least we are getting in on some of that finally, all the pumpkin spice lovers out there. First, though, I do want to focus on Tropical Storm Julia. That is the main threat at hand here. And then we're going to get into that flooding in Florida that will continue to get worse over the next few days. If this is the first time you are discovering this channel, welcome. We talk all things weather. We track the weather together here. Well, I want to welcome all the new subscribers as well. I didn't have a chance to do that before I left town a couple of weeks ago. Of course, that was right before Ian hit Florida. Where I'm at in Central Florida, at least in the immediate area, we didn't have any damage here, but there was a lot of flooding around Central Florida. Of course, the brunt of it was Southwest Florida, where it did make landfall as a strong Category 4 hurricane. So we were thinking of all the Floridians that were strongly impacted by Ian. And of course, we are still thinking about our friends in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Cayman Islands, of course, that were impacted by Fiona before Ian. So after a very quiet start to the hurricane season, we always talk about it to never let your guard down. It only takes one. And now we've seen that twice with the catastrophic flooding in Puerto Rico, courtesy of Fiona, and now the flooding and the extreme damage from Hurricane Ian in Florida, even into South Carolina as it re-strengthened and moved in as a hurricane. All right, so we are looking at Julia now, and we're starting to get some of the outer bands into parts of Nicaragua and Honduras. I'm going to turn the Hurricane Center forecast on for you in a little bit. And if you are watching live, welcome, first of all. Post where you are watching from this afternoon, and we will talk weather where you are, especially if you're watching from the Caribbean or Central America right now. And again, if you're watching from Florida, especially along and near the St. Johns River, stick around for a second. I'm going to show you some of the flooding reports, at least the river gauges here, that are super concerning. Of course, if you're in that area, you know about the flooding that is ongoing, but the river is even going to rise at least a few more inches. Doesn't seem like much, but every inch counts as we get deeper into record flood stage. So the good news about Julia, again, it's never good news when you're talking about a tropical system in the Western Caribbean that's going to be impacting land because of the rain and the terrain. There are some negative impacts affecting it right now. You see, there's the flare up of thunderstorms right in the center. It's still kind of messed up on the northern side, so it's not ready to go gangbusters, if you will. It doesn't have a ton of time to go gangbusters either, with the Central American coastline about there. The other thing is this thing is moving very, very fast. So these fast moving systems really don't have a lot of time to catch their breath as they are moving so fast. Again, they want to be moving on the slower side, not too slow so that they kind of upwell cooler water, but not too fast that they remain discombobulated. They need that kind of Goldilocks, just right kind of thing. And right now it's moving kind of fast, so that is one of the things working against it. Again, in a relative sense, we're still talking about a decently strong hurricane coming into Nicaragua tonight and into early tomorrow. But the other good thing about it moving so fast is that it doesn't have more time to get even stronger. So again, bad news all around. I want to be clear about that, but I'm trying to think of some of the positives here to communicate when we're talking about this system. But still, very heavy rain is going to be likely. Hurricane force winds are going to be likely in Nicaragua, especially along the coast. And then as we move forward into the afternoon tomorrow, that heavy rain threat, that flash flood threat, mudslide threat is going to be there. So again, not good news at all, but it could be worse. So we're thinking about you guys in Nicaragua and Honduras. I want to turn the official track on now from the National Hurricane Center. And what this is going to show is their official forecast again as it goes forward. So there's the center line. Let me get the cone there for you because again, we never want to pay attention to just the center line. You learned that again in Florida's case, if you just paid attention to the center line, then you weren't very prepared in Southwest Florida. Again, a lot of things can happen. That's why there's a cone. It's to account for some of that forecast uncertainty. So I know at one time or another, the center of the cone was over Tampa, but then we looked, it obviously moved forward towards Fort Myers and into Sanibel Island, things like that. That is why there is a cone to account for those wobbles and to account for those subtle changes in the atmosphere that can push these things and kind of bully these things around. So this is the official forecast from the Hurricane Center. You see the cone here. Expected to become a hurricane a little bit later on Saturday. So there is 8 o'clock on Saturday evening. This is going to be 8 o'clock Eastern time here. This is 8 o'clock as we get into 7 o'clock Central time and closer to where this would impact local time. But nonetheless, there you go as we move forward into tonight. There's 8 o'clock. Hey, Ethan, what's going on? I hope that you are doing well in Titusville. I believe it was Titusville. I know there's obviously been some rough weather since the last time that we talked, and I was unable to provide those updates as I was out of town for a couple of weeks and away from the streaming software. And then there you go. By the 8 o'clock on the 9th, that is still Sunday. So that is 8 o'clock in the morning. So again, this is going to be relatively fast here, making landfall overnight and into Sunday morning as a Category 1 hurricane. So again, it's not good news, but it could be worse. There are a few things working against it. So we're gonna focus on the positives. But it is important to note that there is likely going to be some life-threatening flash flooding and very, very heavy rain, which could lead to mudslides as well. I want to show you the high-res future radar. This is of Julia. Here is the Nicaragua-Honduras border right to the top of your screen. And then this kind of shows the same kind of deal. It tries to get its act together, but land is right there. So therefore, the strengthening will stop as it comes ashore as likely a Category 1 hurricane. If it does kind of feed on that juice, that energy that's in the Western Caribbean a little bit more, there is the outside shot that this does get up to Category 2 status. It's something we're watching closely. But again, it's going to run out of time with the coastline there. We're stopping this at about 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. You see the center coming on shore. This is about when it's going to make landfall, give or take. But then the very heavy rainfall continues far away from the center. So you see the heavy rain pushes into Honduras as we get into Sunday afternoon. Again, this is on the 9th. And then more heavy rain continues as this quickly weakens as a whole over the mountainous terrain. But it doesn't really matter how strong the storm is when you have this much moisture. So the main threat, even inland, even along the coast, is going to be the really heavy rainfall. I want to kind of put that on display here. And when you're seeing the yellow and especially that orange color, again, this is the coastline. This is on the northern side here of Honduras, getting back into the extreme Western Caribbean. I mean, we're talking about the potential for double-digit rainfall amounts, even when the center is likely going to come ashore closer to Bluefields in Nicaragua. So this is going to be a widely impacting system through a lot of Central America that could even get up into portions of Belize with the very heavy rain. Again, the main impacts are going to be into Honduras and Nicaragua. You see the heavy rain there. That's 132 millimeters, getting up to 185 millimeters of rain. And again, that is approaching about 10 inches or so of rain. And we always talk about this when there's terrain involved. These computer forecasts underdo the amount a lot. So we could be talking about more than a foot of rain in parts of the mountainous terrain here of Nicaragua and Honduras. So again, that is important to note over the next 48 hours. It could be a rough ride here as we go forward. So again, keep that in mind. Ethan asked, do I think, is there going to be anything behind Julia? I hope not. There likely will be something. Now, the one good thing here is you may have heard that the Saharan dust is back. So that's one of the things that kind of made headlines through most of the hurricane season, which really helped to keep it at bay. Of course, it backed off, and then the season kind of went gangbusters there with Fiona and, of course, Ian. Now we have Julia. But there's at least nothing imminent. The window is going to be open, though, for maybe something in the Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico, climatologically speaking, but there's nothing hinting at this time. I haven't looked, as I just got back into town, too far long range at how the atmosphere is setting up in terms of anything concrete. But there's still a long way to go. We typically do see a flare-up of activity in the middle and latter stages of October before things shut off. But it does look like the Cabo Verde season, those storms that get going off the coast of Africa, climatologically speaking, that part of the season shuts down. And then we also have an abnormally large dust plume, an unseasonably and pretty rare for this time of the year dust plume that will help to deter any kind of development out there as well. So now we have climatology and now some dry, dusty, stable air working against it, at least in that part. Now as these cold fronts start coming down, that tends to put our focus closer to the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. When you start getting the cold fronts coming back, the cold fronts help to kind of push these away. Now they need to time out right. Yeah, and if I remember from looking earlier in the season how the MJO was going to flare up, it looked like it was going to back away through the latter stages of September and into the early part of October, and then come back around again for that part of October. I'm not exactly sure what phase that it's going to be in. If it's 7 and 8, that would favor the Gulf of Mexico. If it's 1 or 2, that's going to favor something rolling off of Africa. But again, by that time, that part of the season kind of rolls away. Hey, Rachel, what's going on? Good to hear from you. The good thing is Jamaica is not going to be really impacted by this. So that is at least some positive news. We may get an outer band or two come through, or at least some of that indirect tropical moisture surging in. But this is not going to be a big deal for Jamaica. I will back that up. I don't even think you can see Jamaica on the high-res radar, that it's so far away from us in Jamaica. And no, you can't. So again, that just kind of shows Jamaica's well off the page on the high-res model run. Again, I think you're going to see an increase in rain from extra Caribbean moisture kind of being pushed into your direction. But that's going to be kind of an indirect byproduct here of Julia moving into Central America. So you will see increased rain, but it's not going to be directly from Julia, if that makes sense. All the direct impacts are going to be towards Nicaragua and into Honduras as well. I know we have some people from Florida around that are joining, and if you are new to the channel, welcome. We would love to have you. Share this with your friends, like it, hit the subscribe button and alert bell, and anytime we post new content, you will be alerted to it. We're going live today because we do have an imminent threat to our friends in Honduras and Nicaragua because of Julia, and we also have the catastrophic flooding continuing into Florida. If anyone is familiar with the St. Johns River in Florida, if you're tuning in from the Sunshine State, you know that this is a weird river. It's a slow-moving river. It flows from south to north. And when we get these flooding events on the river, it takes forever, literally, for the water to recede. Now, most gauges, most river gauges that monitor the flow of the river have already gone into record flood stage. And most of those are still climbing over the next couple of days. The larger bodies of water are always delayed from the onset, from the reason that perturbed the rivers to flood in the first place. So, of course, Ian is long gone, but the residual water that continues to drain into the St. John's allows it to continue to rise even though it's not raining. It's a gorgeous day in Central Florida. Sunshine is out in full force. Temperatures are great. But again, it's not great for those that are living along the St. John's River. So I want to show you the St. John's River near the land. That is good, Ethan. I'm glad MIMS around the St. John's is improving. It is improving from south to north, and that is to be expected, again, with the flow from south to north. I want to show you further up from MIMS. So this is near DeLand, and we are in record flood stage. We set the new record a couple of days ago. We are in record flood stage, and we're expecting to have the river get even higher, cresting as we get into Sunday, Monday into Tuesday. You see that line flatlining here. And as that happens, that's going to be around 6.5 feet. So the record, the previous record set way back, I believe in the 50s, was 6.1 feet. So we're about 4 to 5 inches above the record flood stage, and we are going to stay in that record flood stage through most, if not all, of the week ahead. So you need to know that we're not, we're talking about this thing in record flood stage. Forget major flood stage. That is likely for another few days to maybe even a week beyond that. So we're talking about the next 2 weeks of little to no change in the St. John's River near the land. So I want you to be aware of that. And again, this is likely going to be in some sort of flood stage for the next few weeks at least, and likely more than a month. If you recall what happened in Irma in 2017, this is way worse than that. So you need to know that. Now I want to show you the St. John's River at Astor. This one gets a lot of publicity as well and around Astor because it's so prone to flooding. We had a lot of flooding in Irma. The flood of record is not from Irma, but that did crest at 4.6 feet. This is an update from the last couple of days. It is now forecast to reach or to tie record flood stage in Astor. So again, if you're living around Astor, right now we're already in major flood stage, and it's going to rise even further as we move into Sunday. And again, that is Sunday at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon that we're going to have that roll through. And again, major flood stage going to stay with us, record flood stage going to stay with us potentially through the end of the week. Forget about it again in major flood stage. It stays around for at least the next week, unfortunately, maybe 2. So while the weather has been beautiful in Florida for the last couple of days, there are still nasty conditions going on along and around the St. John's River and its tributaries. Yeah, unfortunately, those rain chances are going up, especially as we get into Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Of course, anything is adding insult to injury at that point, unfortunately. We don't want any kind of rain. We need a lot of time to dry out. It's amazing what a tropical system can do. We were talking about a lot of these areas in Central Florida desperately needing rain, and that's one historic event can change all of that. And now we're talking about record flooding on the St. John's and in some of the tributaries around. I want to show you this. This is near Geneva. This is closer to the Brevard and Seminole County line, if you're familiar with this part of Central Florida. This is going to be specifically where the gauge is at above Lake Harney. Now, I don't want to call this good news that we've already crested. It's not good news because we crested way above the record. I mean, we're talking about as of Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, as of 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, we're still reporting a water level, a river level of 12.22 feet. That is more than a foot above the previous record of 11.1 feet. we are expected to keep things, even though the water levels are coming down on this part of the St. John's, we are going to stay in record flood stage through at least the week ahead. So that water, while it is slowly but surely coming down, at least this is on the lone part of the St. John's. Again, the further south you are, you'll start to see the waters recede a little bit more, a little quicker. It's all going to be slow. This is going to be an ugly, painstaking process. This is one of the awful parts when you're talking about flooding from a hurricane. All of it is bad. The water may be the worst of it. It certainly kills the most from the hurricane. It's not the wind. We always talk about that. It's the water that kills, not the wind. But I mean, again, you're looking all the way through Thursday afternoon, the upcoming Thursday. Yeah, I've seen some of those photos of Highway 46, and I mean, I believe it's at 10 feet. That the St. Johns River covers Highway 46. Yeah, it's at 10.8 feet, according to the Weather Service. And again, we're going to be well above that into next week. So parts of State Road 46 are still going to be underwater through at least the end of this upcoming work week. So just insane. I mean, again, we're seeing things that haven't happened before. And I mean, Irma was bad with the flooding. But man, Ian's way worse with that in terms of the flooding. So again, we're thinking about you guys. We know that a lot of Florida was hit very, very hard. Excuse me. By Ian, well inland. And again, that's something we also always talk about when we're dealing with these storms, dealing with these tropical depression storms or hurricanes. It doesn't really matter what the category was. Of course, Ian was extremely intense, almost coming ashore as a Category 5 hurricane. It was 2 miles an hour away from that. 3 miles an hour away is 155. You need greater than 157 for a Cat 5. It doesn't matter. The damage is catastrophic in Southwest Florida and through parts of Central Florida as well. And that flooding is unfortunately going to continue along the St. John's for the foreseeable future. When you see the flood warnings that are in effect from the National Weather Service, again, they say until further notice. That's how long it's going to take for these flood waters to come down. You won't start even to see improvements until at least the end of next week, or this upcoming work week, the Thursday and Friday, in the middle of October, October 13th, 14th. That's when we'll start to see some minuscule improvements, just because of the nature of the St. John's and how slow this water historically comes down. So welcome everybody that is just tuning in. We were talking about Julia. That's heading towards Central America. Excuse me, as a tropical storm now likely to become a Category 1 hurricane. So if you're watching from Central America, we're thinking about you guys. And if you're new to this channel, love to have you on board. We track weather together all the time, and we talk about it. Would love to have you on board. Just hit that like and subscribe button. We don't normally go live. We go live every now and then when there's something threatening, just to give you guys a heads up and to pass this along and to share this along to your friends that may not be aware of what's going on. But it's been all things bad weather, at least to start, with all that stuff. See you later, Ethan. Thanks for sticking with us and for tuning in. And I hope everything continues to be well for you in Brevard, and that the water continues to recede for you. The one positive note that I do have for people that are tuning in, especially from the eastern third of the country, is fall has finally arrived. This is really the first blast, if you will, of fall. So for all of the UGG-wearing, pumpkin spice sipping, coffee drinking, hot chocolate loving folks, crisp air, I'm running out of things. You get the picture. For those that love fall, this is finally it. It's been so hot for so long. And we've had frost advisories. We've had freeze warnings earlier this morning in the upper Midwest. We have frost advisories now extending into Pennsylvania, Virginia, through the Ohio River Valley. Frost and freeze likely coming to parts. You see there the temperature forecast. The 30s getting into parts of Ohio, into western Pennsylvania, into West Virginia, down in Kentucky, for us into Tennessee. It's coming. And to mention again, we're out of central Florida. It was in the 60s and 50s in parts of Florida this morning. Yes, that is chilly for the Floridians. So again, if you've been missing fall and itching for fall now that we have football back, here is some of my positive weather news as we do have the flooding and the hurricane still going on. Fall is making its real first big, widespread appearance of the season, really from the Dakotas through Minnesota into Illinois and really through parts of even the deep south. Look at that, 40s and 50s into Atlanta and into parts of northern Alabama and Mississippi. Alrighty, guys, post in the comments where you are watching from. Would love to see where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions, hit me up in the chat section as well. If you're new to the channel, if you're finding us for the first time, again, we track weather together. We have a great time doing it. Love it when the weather is not impacting anybody, but it always impacts people. And I love when we can talk about the stuff that people like, especially if you love fall. The blast of cold, not of course the hurricanes and some of the destructive weather that we've had over the past 3 weeks with Fiona, with Ian, and now with Julia moving into parts of Nicaragua and Honduras, likely going to make landfall along the Nicaraguan coast sometime overnight tonight and then early on Sunday morning. Likely as a Category 1 hurricane. There is room for more, potentially a Category 2, but right now the official forecast, again, calls for that to be a Category 1 storm. I will show you that one last time. If you are just joining in, this is the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. This is the satellite, the high-res GO16 image. You see the flare-up of thunderstorms here. And again, we were talking about some of the deterrents. There's still some dry air up here, so it's not completely filled in. Again, it's not good news per se, but at least that, in addition to its forward speed that's going 21, 22 miles an hour, it's going to help to keep this thing from getting really organized really quick, which will prevent it from rapidly intensifying, but still expected to get stronger. You see by this time, we turn my telestration off. There's the forecast point as it head towards San Andreas. 80-mile-per-hour storm. It's a hurricane by that point tonight. That is 8 o'clock on this Saturday evening local time. You're already feeling some of the gusty outer bands and then likely making a landfall sometime overnight and into early Sunday morning along the Nicaraguan coastline. Again, here is the border of Honduras, that white line. Where'd my telestration go? I'm going to turn that back on for you so you can see right there. Closer to Pearl City and then closer to Bluefields. And then the heavy rain really expanding all the way to a really good chunk, unfortunately, of Central America. So we are thinking about you guys as well. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. We'd love to have you on board on this channel. Again, we talk all things weather. We track the weather together and we talk about it. We break it down. Any questions, hit me up on the chat. Please like, please subscribe, and we will catch you guys next time.